She stood there with her designer handbag clutched against her chest like armor, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at my grease-stained hands. "Look at yourself, Marcus," Rebecca sneered, loud enough for our entire family to hear over the 4th of July music. 32 years old, and you're still just a mechanic. Mom and Dad must be so proud of their dropout son. Her husband David nodded along, adjusting his expensive watch while scanning the crowd to make sure everyone witnessed my humiliation. What they didn't know was that in 5 minutes, everything they thought they knew about me would crumble like dust. My name is Marcus Rivera, and this is the day my family learned who I really am. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Colorado sun beat down mercilessly on the Riverside Community Center Pavilion, where 43 members of the Rivera family had gathered for our annual reunion. Red, white, and blue streamers hung limply in the stifling heat, and the smell of barbacoa and fresh tortillas mixed with the chlorine scent from the nearby swimming pool. I'd been dreading this day for months, knowing exactly what was coming. Every year it was the same routine. Rebecca would show up in her latest designer outfit, David would flash his newest expensive toy, and I'd become the family cautionary tale. I wiped my hands on my jeans, still feeling the phantom weight of the wrench I'd been using that morning at Rodriguez Auto Repair. It wasn't that I had to work on Saturday mornings. Truth was, I owned a third of the shop now, but nobody in my family knew that. They saw what they wanted to see. Marcus, the college dropout who threw away his computer science degree to get his hands dirty with engine oil. "Rebecca, come on," I said quietly, glancing toward where our mom Elena was setting out paper plates. "It's a family reunion. Can we just have one day without this?" "Without what?" Rebecca's voice rose another octave. "Without talking about how you've wasted every opportunity Mom and Dad gave you? Do you know how embarrassing it is when people ask me what my little brother does for work?" She turned to address the growing circle of cousins and aunts who had stopped their conversations to watch our drama unfold. "I have to tell them my brother chose to be a grease monkey instead of using his brain." David stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Rebecca's shoulder like she was the victim here. His golf shirt bore the logo of some exclusive country club, and his boat shoes probably cost more than most people's rent. "Look, Marcus, no judgment here, but maybe it's time to think about your future. I mean, you're not getting any younger, and manual labor is tough on the body." He gestured vaguely at my calloused hands. "Rebecca and I have connections. We could probably get you into an entry-level position somewhere. Nothing fancy, but at least you'd be using your mind instead of your hands." The condescension in his voice made my jaw clench, but I'd learned years ago that defending myself only made it worse. Let them think what they wanted. In their minds, success was measured by designer labels and luxury cars, by country club memberships and corner offices with windows. They couldn't comprehend that someone might choose a different path, might find satisfaction in building something from the ground up rather than climbing someone else's ladder. "I appreciate the offer," I said, forcing my voice to stay level, "but I'm happy where I am." "Happy?" Rebecca laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the ambient noise of children playing and adults chatting. "Marcus, you live in a one-bedroom apartment and drive a Honda that's older than some of these kids running around. When's the last time you took a vacation? When's the last time you bought something nice for yourself?" Her eyes swept over my simple polo shirt and worn jeans. "This isn't happiness. This is settling." Our cousin Luis caught my eye from across the pavilion and started walking over. He was one of the few family members who knew there was more to my story, though even he didn't know the full extent of it. Luis worked construction and understood the dignity of physical labor, the satisfaction of creating something tangible with your hands. "Hey Marcus," Luis said as he joined our circle, completely ignoring the tension. "I was hoping I'd catch you here. My neighbor's been having trouble with his computer, keeps getting these weird pop-up messages, and his bank called about suspicious activity. You still do that tech support stuff on the side?" I nodded. "Yeah, tell him to bring it by the shop Monday. I'll take a look." Tech support. David raised an eyebrow. I didn't know you did computer work. Just basic stuff, I said quickly. Virus removal, data recovery, nothing complicated. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Great, so you're a part-time computer fixer too, really maximizing that college education you threw away. She turned to Luis. Did you know he was actually studying computer science before he dropped out? Had decent grades and everything. Just decided one day that working on cars was more important than his future. The truth was I'd dropped out because Phoenix Digital Solutions was taking off faster than I'd expected. What started as a dorm room project helping fellow students secure their laptops and personal data had evolved into something much bigger. By junior year, I was getting calls from local businesses, then regional companies, then corporations with security breaches that made the evening news. The choice wasn't between staying in school or working on cars, it was between finishing my degree or building something that could change my life forever. But how do you explain that to a family that measures success by the size of your paycheck stub and the brand of your clothes? How do you tell them that you chose to work at Rodriguez Auto Repair not because you had to, but because Tony Rodriguez had become like a second father to you? That you enjoyed the meditative quality of diagnosing engine problems, the satisfaction of bringing something broken back to life with your hands? Look, David said, checking his phone as it buzzed with what he claimed was another urgent work call. All I'm saying is that Rebecca and I want to help. We've built a good life, and we know people, the right people. He glanced around the pavilion, taking in the folding chairs and paper tablecloths. Don't you want more than this? Before I could answer, Elena's voice called out over the crowd. Everyone, food's ready. Come get your plates. The announcement created a natural break in our conversation, but I could feel the weight of my family's judgment as we made our way toward the serving tables. Rebecca walked ahead of me, her heels clicking against the concrete, while David continued scrolling through his phone with the self-important air of someone whose time was far too valuable to be spent at a simple family gathering. I loaded my plate with Elena's tamales and Luis's wife's tres leches cake, trying to focus on the familiar comfort foods rather than the disappointed looks I kept catching from various relatives. It wasn't that they were cruel people, they loved me in their own way. But they'd built their understanding of success around Rebecca's path: college degree, corporate job, suburban house, two-car garage. In their eyes, I was the cautionary tale, the bright kid who'd somehow lost his way. What they didn't understand was that I hadn't lost anything. If anything, I'd found something they couldn't comprehend. Every morning when I walked into Rodriguez Auto Repair, I wasn't just fixing cars, I was maintaining the cover that allowed me to move through the world without the weight of expectations, without the constant pressure to prove myself worthy of my own success. The auto shop was my sanctuary, the place where I could work with my hands while my mind solved problems they couldn't imagine. But explaining that would require revealing
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Everything, and I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet, so I sat at the picnic table, listening to Rebecca detail her latest promotion and David's upcoming golf tournament at the country club, while inside I carried the quiet knowledge that my company had just signed a contract that would bring in more money this year than David would see in the next 5. The irony wasn't lost on me that while David criticized my life choices, his own company was currently dealing with a massive security breach that had made the local news just 2 weeks ago. Martinez Industries had been hit by ransomware that locked down their entire customer database, and from what I'd read in the business section of the Denver Post, they were hemorrhaging money while trying to restore their systems and rebuild client trust. I took another bite of tamale and watched my brother-in-law continue to scroll through his phone, probably dealing with the fallout from that very incident. If he only knew that the solution to his company's problems was sitting right across from him, eating potato salad and listening to him explain why manual labor was a dead-end career choice. The afternoon stretched on with the familiar rhythms of family gatherings. Children chased each other between tables while adults caught up on marriages, divorces, new jobs, and health scares. Elena circulated with a coffee pot, making sure everyone had enough to eat, while our father Roberto held court near the horseshoe pit, telling the same stories he'd been telling for 20 years. It was comfortable and predictable, the kind of gathering that reminded you why family mattered even when they drove you completely insane. But underneath the normalcy, I could feel the undercurrent of disappointment that followed me through every family. The whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by, the way distant relatives would ask about my situation with the kind of careful concern usually reserved for discussing terminal illnesses. They meant well, but their pity was almost harder to bear than Rebecca's open contempt. As the sun began to angle lower in the sky, painting the pavilion in golden light, I found myself thinking about the life I'd built in secret. Phoenix Digital Solutions occupied 3 floors of a downtown Denver office building, with 52 employees who looked to me for leadership and vision. We'd just landed a contract with a major healthcare network that would require expanding our team by another 20 people. The company I'd started in my dorm room was now valued at over $15 million, and my personal net worth had crossed the $3 million mark 6 months ago. But none of that mattered here, surrounded by folding chairs and paper plates. Here I was, just Marcus the dropout, the family disappointment who'd thrown away his potential for the sake of getting his hands dirty. It was a role I'd grown comfortable playing, even if it sometimes felt like wearing clothes that were 3 sizes too small. The real irony was that if my family could see past their own assumptions, they'd realize that everything I'd built was an extension of the same curiosity and problem-solving instincts that made me good at fixing cars. Whether I was diagnosing why an engine wouldn't start, or figuring out how hackers had penetrated a company's firewall, the process was remarkably similar. You gathered information, formed hypotheses, tested solutions, and kept refining your approach until you found what worked. But try explaining that to Rebecca, who saw success as a linear progression up a corporate ladder, or to David, who measured worth by the size of your office and the thread count of your dress shirts. They'd built their identities around external validation, around the approval of people who ultimately didn't matter. I'd chosen a different path, one that valued substance over symbols, results over recognition. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself wondering how long I could maintain this double life. There was something appealing about the simplicity of being underestimated, about moving through the world without the weight of expectations that came with visible success. But there was also something exhausting about constantly hiding who you really were, about letting people you loved believe things about you that weren't true. The sun was starting to cast longer shadows across the pavilion when I noticed a woman I didn't recognize talking to David near the parking lot. She was Asian, probably in her 40s, wearing business casual clothes that seemed out of place among the shorts and sundresses that dominated the gathering. She carried a laptop bag and kept checking her phone, the universal signs of someone who was working even during their time off. David seemed animated as he talked to her, gesturing enthusiastically, while she nodded politely. From where I sat, I could see her glancing around the pavilion like she was looking for someone, though I couldn't imagine who she might know at a Rivera family reunion. "Who's that woman talking to David?" I asked Luis, who had rejoined our table after finishing his second helping of barbacoa. Luis squinted toward the parking lot. "No idea, maybe someone from his work. She looks like she means business." As if summoned by our conversation, David began walking toward our table with the woman following a few steps behind. Rebecca perked up immediately, smoothing her hair and adjusting her necklace in preparation for what she clearly hoped would be an introduction to someone important from David's professional circle. "Hey everyone," David called out as they approached, "I want you to meet Jennifer Chen. She's the VP of Technology at Martinez Industries, and she's been working overtime trying to help us recover from that cyber attack I mentioned. Jennifer, this is my wife Rebecca and her family." Jennifer smiled politely and shook hands with Rebecca, who immediately launched into her standard introduction routine, the one designed to establish her own importance and distance herself from the less successful members of her family. But as Jennifer's eyes swept across our table, they stopped when they reached me. For a moment she just stared, her expression shifting from polite interest to something that looked like recognition, then confusion, then a growing certainty that made my stomach drop to somewhere around my shoes. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. "But you look incredibly familiar. Have we met before?" The question hung in the air like smoke from the barbacoa grill, and I felt my carefully constructed world beginning to tilt on its axis. Jennifer Chen stood there studying my face with the kind of intense focus I'd seen her use during our video conferences, though she'd never seen me clearly through the camera. I'd always made sure the lighting was dim, my face partially obscured, claiming technical difficulties with my webcam whenever she suggested switching to better video quality. "I don't think so," I said carefully, my voice steady despite the way my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I'm just Marcus. I work at an auto repair shop here in town." But Jennifer wasn't buying it. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and I could practically see the gears turning in her mind. She was one of the sharpest technology executives I'd ever worked with, the kind of person who built her career on pattern recognition and attention to detail. The kind of person who didn't let things go once they caught her interest. "Your voice," she said slowly, tilting her head. "It's very distinctive. I've been working with someone who sounds exactly like you for the past 3 months. Someone who's been helping us rebuild our entire security infrastructure after the breach." She paused, studying me more intently. "Someone whose expertise has probably saved my company millions of dollars." David laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "I think you're confusing my brother-in-law with someone else. Marcus here fixes transmissions and changes oil. He's not exactly in the cybersecurity business." He gestured toward my grease-stained hands as if they were evidence of my limitations. "Though he does do some basic computer repair on the side. Maybe you heard about him through that." Rebecca jumped in, clearly eager to manage what she perceived as a case of mistaken identity before it became embarrassing. "Yes, Marcus dabbles in computer stuff as a hobby, but nothing professional. He actually dropped out of college before finishing his computer science degree." She gave Jennifer an apologetic smile. "I'm sure whoever you're thinking of has actual credentials and training." The patronizing tone in my sister's voice made something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. For years I'd listened to her diminish my choices, reduce my accomplishments to nothing more than wasted potential and misguided decisions. I'd accepted it as the price of maintaining my privacy, of keeping my 2 lives separate and manageable. But sitting there watching her explain to Jennifer Chen why I couldn't possibly be the person who'd been solving problems that stumped entire teams of corporate IT specialists, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. Jennifer wasn't backing down. If anything, David and Rebecca's dismissive explanations seemed to strengthen her conviction. "What's your last name?" she asked me directly, ignoring the others entirely. "Rivera," I said quietly. "Marcus Rivera." She repeated it slowly, then her eyes widened as the pieces clicked into place. "Main.A. Rivera, the M.A. Rivera, whose company has been working around the clock to rebuild our network architecture. Rivera, who identified the exact vulnerability that allowed the ransomware attack and designed a completely new security protocol that's already being implemented across 3 different departments." The silence that followed was profound. Even the children playing nearby seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere and lowered their voices. David's face had gone through several color changes, settling on a pale yellow that made him look slightly nauseated. Rebecca was staring at me like I'd suddenly sprouted a second head. "That's impossible," Rebecca said finally, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Marcus doesn't run a company. He works at Rodriguez Auto Repair. He drives a Honda Civic. He lives in a 1-bedroom apartment." Jennifer reached into her laptop bag and pulled out a folder marked with the Phoenix Digital Solutions logo. The phoenix itself was rendered in elegant silver foil, rising from flames that seemed to dance in the afternoon sunlight. I've got 3 months' worth of correspondence from M.A. Rivera, CEO of Phoenix Digital Solutions. Invoices, technical specifications, progress reports. She opened the folder and pulled out a contract. This is the agreement we signed for ongoing security consultation. It's worth $2.4 million annually. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. I watched David's face as he processed it. Watched the exact moment when he realized that the person he'd been offering entry-level employment to was earning more in a year than he'd probably see in the next 5. $2.4 million, Rebecca whispered, her designer handbag slipping from nerveless fingers. Annually. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 3 years of hidden success settling onto my shoulders like a mantle. Around us, family members who'd been pretending not to listen were now openly staring, their conversations forgotten as they tried to process what they were hearing. "Jennifer," I said, extending my hand formally. "It's good to finally meet you in person. I apologize for the confusion, but I prefer to keep my professional life and family life separate. For obvious reasons." I glanced meaningfully at Rebecca and David, who were both gaping at me like fish pulled from water. Jennifer shook my hand, her grip firm and professional. "The pleasure is all mine, Mr. Rivera. Your work has been exceptional. When the ransomware hit, our entire customer database was locked down, our communication systems were compromised, and we were facing potential lawsuits from clients whose information had been exposed. Your team had us back online, in 48 hours with better security than we'd ever had before." "Your team," David's voice cracked on the words. "You have a team. 52 employees as of last month." I said calmly. "We're hiring 20 more next quarter to handle the increased demand. Apparently, word is getting around about our work on the Martinez Industries recovery." Rebecca had gone very still, the kind of stillness that comes right before a dam breaks. 52 employees, she repeated mechanically. "You have 52 people working for you. 53 if you count me," I said, "though I still spend Saturdays at Rodriguez Auto Repair. Tony taught me everything I know about diagnosing problems and finding solutions. Turns out the same skills that help you figure out why an engine won't start are pretty useful when you're trying to figure out how hackers got into a corporate network." Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that made your approach so effective. Most cybersecurity firms focus on building walls to keep threats out. Your methodology is more like detective work, following the evidence trail to understand not just what happened, but why it happened and how to prevent it from happening again." Louis started laughing, a deep, genuinely delighted sound that cut through the tension. "I knew it," he said, shaking his head. "I knew there was more to those computer repair jobs you were taking on. People don't call a mechanic to fix sophisticated malware infections." He stood up and clapped me on the shoulder. "How long have you been running this company?" 3 years officially, I said, though the groundwork started back in college before I dropped out to focus on it full time. We were growing too fast to ignore, getting too many high-profile clients to treat it like a side project anymore. "You dropped out to start a multi-million-dollar company," Rebecca said slowly, as if she was still trying to make the pieces fit together. "Not because you were failing, not because you couldn't handle the work, because you were succeeding beyond what college could teach you. The computer science program was excellent," I said diplomatically, "but I was learning more from real-world problems than from textbooks. When major corporations started calling with security breaches that made the evening news, I had to make a choice. Stay in school and let the opportunities pass by, or take the leap and see how far I could go." David was staring at the contract in Jennifer's hands like it might spontaneously combust. "Your company solved our security crisis. You're the one who's been working with Jennifer for the past 3 months. You're the reason Martinez Industries didn't go under after the attack. The company you work for," Louis said, grinning widely, "was saved by the family dropout. That's some beautiful irony right there." Jennifer looked confused by the family dynamics playing out in front of her, but she pressed on with obvious admiration. Rivera, I have to tell you that your work has been extraordinary. Not just the technical solutions, but your communication style, your ability to explain complex security concepts to non-technical executives. Our CEO has been asking when we can schedule an in-person meeting to discuss expanding our contract. Expanding? David's voice was barely above a whisper. We want Phoenix Digital Solutions to handle security for all our subsidiary companies. Potentially a $12 million annual contract, if we can work out the details. Jennifer closed her folder and looked at me with genuine respect. Your reputation in the industry is exceptional. I've been telling colleagues about the innovative approaches you've developed. You're going to be very busy in the coming months. Rebecca sat down heavily on the picnic table bench, her perfect posture finally cracking. $12 million, she said to no one in particular. You're talking about $12 million in annual contracts. Around us, the family reunion was transforming into something entirely different. Conversations had stopped as relatives processed what they were hearing. Our cousin Maria, who'd been setting out desserts, was standing frozen with a tres leches cake balanced on her palms. Elena had emerged from behind the beverage table and was watching the scene unfold with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe. Or vindication. Or perhaps just the quiet satisfaction of a mother who'd always believed in her son, even when he couldn't explain why that faith was justified. The thing is, I said, looking directly at Rebecca, success doesn't always look the way we expect it to. I could have bought a house in the suburbs, driven a luxury car, joined a country club, but that's not who I am. I like my one-bedroom apartment because it's 5 minutes from the office and 10 minutes from Rodriguez Auto Repair. I drive a Honda Civic because it's reliable and I can fix it myself if something goes wrong. I work Saturdays at the shop because Tony Rodriguez gave me a job when I needed one, and because there's something satisfying about solving problems with your hands instead of just your mind. But why didn't you tell us? Rebecca's voice was small now, stripped of its earlier condescension. Why let us think you were struggling? Why endure years of us treating you like a disappointment? The question hit deeper than I'd expected. I looked around at the faces of my family, seeing the confusion and hurt in their expressions, and realized that my choice to keep my success hidden had consequences I hadn't fully considered. Because this, I gestured to the pavilion around us, to the folding chairs and paper plates, and the simple pleasure of family gathered together. This is real. The moment people know you have money, everything changes. Every conversation becomes about what you can do for them. Every relationship gets filtered through the lens of your net worth. I wanted to keep at least one part of my life, where I was just Marcus, where people related to me as a person instead of as a bank account. Jennifer was listening to this exchange with obvious fascination, probably getting more insight into family dynamics than she'd bargained for when she'd approached our table, but she seemed in no hurry to leave, perhaps recognizing that she was witnessing something significant. Plus, I continued. There was a part of me that enjoyed being underestimated. When people think you're just a mechanic, they don't expect much from you. That gives you tremendous freedom to exceed expectations, to surprise people with what you're capable of accomplishing. David finally found his voice. But we made you feel bad. We criticized your choices, offered you charity jobs, treated you like you needed our help. Yes, you did, I said simply. And that hurt. But it also motivated me. Every time someone told me I was wasting my potential, every time someone suggested I was settling for less than I deserved, it reminded me why I was working so hard to build something meaningful. Elena finally approached our table, her weathered hands still holding the coffee pot she'd been carrying when Jennifer's revelations began. She looked at me for a long moment, then turned to Rebecca and David with an expression that could have melted steel. My son, she said quietly, has always been special, smart, hard-working, determined. Some of you were too busy looking at his clothes and his car to see what was right in front of you. But I knew. A mother knows when her child is building Something important, even when she doesn't understand exactly what that something is. Rebecca started crying then, tears that seemed to come from somewhere deep and unexpected. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I thought I was protecting you, pushing you to want more. I thought you had given up on yourself, and I was trying to make you see your potential. My potential was never the problem, I said gently. The problem was that we had different definitions of what success looks like. You saw it as climbing a corporate ladder, accumulating status symbols, impressing people with your title and your salary. I saw it as building something from nothing, solving problems that mattered, creating jobs for other people. Jennifer cleared her throat diplomatically. I hate to interrupt what's obviously a very personal family moment, but I do have a flight to catch this evening. Mr. Rivera, would it be possible to schedule that in-person meeting with our CEO sometime next week? I think after today's events, he's going to be even more interested in expanding our partnership. I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar app. Tuesday afternoon works for me. Shall we say 2 o'clock at your downtown office? Perfect. Jennifer packed her folder back into her laptop bag, then paused. For what it's worth, your approach to balancing professional success with personal authenticity is refreshing. Too many executives in this industry lose themselves in their achievements. You seem to have figured out how to succeed without sacrificing who you are. After Jennifer left, the family reunion took on a surreal quality. Conversations resumed, but with a different energy, a different focus. Instead of the usual gossip and small talk, people were processing what they'd learned, trying to reconcile their assumptions about me with this new reality. Luis sat back down beside me, still grinning. So Phoenix Digital Solutions, that's a solid name. I'm guessing there's a story behind it. I nodded. The phoenix rises from its own ashes, transforms destruction into renewal. That's what we do for companies that have been compromised. We help them rebuild stronger than they were before. And you're worth millions, Rebecca said, as if saying it out loud might help her believe it. The company is worth millions, I corrected. I'm comfortable, but I'm not swimming in gold coins like Scrooge McDuck. Most of the value is tied up in equipment, office space, employee salaries. I pay myself well, but I also reinvest heavily in growth and innovation. David was staring at his hands, probably thinking about all the times he'd offered to help me network, all the condescending advice he'd given about building a career. I feel like an idiot, he said finally. You're not an idiot, I said. You just made assumptions based on limited information. We all do that sometimes. But I work for a company that you saved, he said, shaking his head. My job exists because of the work you did. Our entire customer base could have walked away after the breach, but your security solutions convinced them to stay. I owe my paycheck to my wife's dropout brother. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. For months, David had been dealing with the stress of the Martinez Industries crisis, worrying about job security and company stability, while criticizing the very person who was working behind the scenes to solve those problems. Elena sat down across from me, setting the coffee pot aside. Mijo, she said, using the endearment she'd called me since childhood, I'm proud of what you've built. But I'm also glad you still come to family reunions, still work at Tony's shop, still remember where you come from. That's never changing, I said firmly. Success doesn't mean abandoning the people and places that shaped you. It means having the resources to support them better. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, the atmosphere at the reunion gradually shifted from shock to celebration. Family members who'd barely spoken to me in years were suddenly eager to hear about my company, my employees, my plans for the future. It was gratifying, but also a little sad. I was still the same person I'd been that morning, but now that they knew about my bank account, I was suddenly worthy of their attention and respect. Roberto, my father, finally approached our table as the sun was setting behind the mountains. He was a man of few words, someone who expressed love through actions rather than speeches. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. Good, he said simply. You did good, Mijo. Coming from him, those 3 words meant more than all the congratulations and apologies combined. Roberto understood what it meant to build something with your hands, to create value through hard work and determination. His approval carried weight that no amount of money could buy. As families began packing up their folding chairs and loading leftover food into coolers, Rebecca approached me one last time. Her designer clothes were slightly wrinkled now, her perfect makeup smudged from crying, but she looked more human than she had all day. Marcus, she said quietly, I need you to know that everything I said, all the criticism and the pushing, it came from love, misguided love, maybe, but love nonetheless. I was scared that you were going to struggle, that you were going to have a hard life, and I thought I was helping by trying to motivate you to want more. I know, I said, and I need you to know that I don't blame you for not understanding. I chose not to explain, chose to let you think what you wanted to think. That's on me as much as it's on you. She hugged me then, a real hug that lasted longer than our perfunctory holiday greetings usually did. I love you, she said into my shoulder. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry it took a stranger recognizing your success for me to see it myself. David joined us, extending his hand formally. I owe you an apology, he said. And probably a thank you. Your company literally saved my job, and I've been spending months telling you how to live your life better. No apology necessary, I said, shaking his hand. But maybe next time we can skip the career advice and just enjoy the barbacoa. He laughed, a sound that held genuine relief. Deal, though I have to ask, are you hiring? Because working for a company that's clients with Phoenix Digital Solutions is good, but working directly for Phoenix Digital Solutions might be even better. We're always looking for good people, I said diplomatically. Send me your resume, and we'll see if there's a fit. As the Rivera family reunion wound down, as relatives loaded their cars with leftover food and promised to stay in touch better, I felt something fundamental had shifted. The secret I'd carried for 3 years was finally out, and the world hadn't ended. If anything, it had expanded. The careful boundaries I'd built between my professional and personal lives had dissolved, and I was surprised to find that I didn't mind as much as I'd expected. Luis was the last to leave, helping Elena and Roberto pack up the decorations and folding tables. So what happens now? He asked, as we loaded the last of the chairs into his truck. Now I go back to work, I said. Phoenix Digital Solutions has contracts to fulfill, clients to serve, employees who depend on their paychecks. The only difference is that I don't have to pretend anymore when I come to family gatherings. And Rodriguez Auto Repair, Saturday mornings just like always, I said. Some things are too important to change, even when everything else is different. Elena kissed my cheek before getting into Roberto's truck. Mijo, she said, success looks good on you, but so does humility. Don't lose that. I won't, Mama, I promised. That's not who I am. As I drove home in my Honda Civic, past the luxury cars and through the neighborhoods where million-dollar houses sat behind perfectly manicured lawns, I thought about the day's revelations and what they meant for the future. Tomorrow I'd go back to being Rivera, CEO of Phoenix Digital Solutions, the cybersecurity expert whose reputation was spreading throughout the industry. But I'd also still be Marcus Rivera, the guy who could diagnose engine trouble by sound, and who found peace in the methodical process of rebuilding carburetors. The phone call I'd been dreading came that evening, just as I was settling into my one-bedroom apartment with leftover tamales and a beer. Jennifer Chen's name appeared on my caller ID, and I answered with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Mr. Rivera, she said, her voice carrying notes of excitement and professionalism. I hope you don't mind me calling on a Sunday evening, but I couldn't wait until tomorrow to share the news. I've been on the phone with our CEO for the past hour, discussing today's revelations and their implications for our partnership. Good implications, I hope, I said, though something in her tone suggested I already knew the answer. The best, she said. We want to offer Phoenix Digital Solutions an exclusive contract to handle all cybersecurity operations for Martinez Industries and its 17 subsidiary companies. We're talking about a comprehensive partnership that would include everything from routine security audits to crisis response protocols. The initial contract value would be $25 million annually, with performance bonuses that could push it closer to $30 million. I set my beer down carefully, processing numbers that were larger than I'd ever imagined when I'd started the company in my college dorm room. 25 to 30 million, I repeated slowly. Annually, Jennifer confirmed, with automatic renewals based on performance metrics. Essentially, we want Phoenix Digital Solutions to become our exclusive cybersecurity partner for the next 5 years, with options to extend beyond that. Your work on our recent crisis was so exceptional that our board of directors voted unanimously to make this offer. The irony was almost too perfect to be real. David Martinez, who'd spent the day explaining to me why I needed to aim higher in life, worked for a company that was about to pay me more money than he'd probably see in his entire career. The same David who'd offered to get me an entry-level position somewhere, as if I needed his charity to improve my circumstances. That's an incredibly generous offer, I said carefully. I'll need to review it with my team and make sure we have the capacity to handle an engagement of that scope. Of course, Jennifer said. Take all the time you need, though I should mention that word of your work is already spreading in the industry. We've had 3 other companies ask us for referrals to Phoenix Digital Solutions in the past week alone. I suspect you're about to become very busy regardless of whether you accept our exclusive partnership. After we hung up, I sat in my simple apartment, surrounded by the comfortable clutter of a life lived without pretense, and tried to process what had just happened. In the space of a single day, my carefully constructed double life had been exposed, my family's understanding of who I was had been completely rewritten, and my company had been offered a contract that would transform it from a regional success story into a national player in the cybersecurity industry. The person I'd been that morning, the underestimated family dropout who fixed cars on weekends, was gone. In his place was someone whose success could no longer be hidden, whose achievements would be impossible to downplay or dismiss. It was exciting and terrifying in equal measure. I pulled out my laptop and began drafting an email to my management team, outlining Jennifer's offer and the strategic considerations it would raise. If we accepted the Martinez Industries contract, we'd need to hire aggressively, probably double our workforce within 6 months. We'd need bigger offices, more sophisticated equipment, additional layers of management to handle the increased complexity. But as I wrote, I found myself thinking about Saturday mornings at Rodriguez Auto Repair, about the satisfaction of diagnosing a stubborn transmission problem or bringing a dead engine back to life. Those moments of simple, honest work had kept me grounded through 3 years of rapid business growth. They'd reminded me that real success wasn't about accumulating wealth or impressing people, but about solving problems that mattered and helping people in tangible ways. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new complexities to navigate. But Saturday would still find me under the hood of someone's car, getting my hands dirty while my mind wandered through the elegant logic of mechanical systems. Some things were too important to change, even when everything else was transforming around them. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp Colorado air that promised autumn was just around the corner. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of a shirt that cost more than most people's car payments, and wondered if I was making a mistake. For 3 years I'd shown up at Rodriguez Auto Repair in worn jeans and oil-stained t-shirts, comfortable in the anonymity that came with being underestimated. Today, for the first time since I'd started working Saturdays at the shop, I was arriving as M.A. Rivera, CEO of Phoenix Digital Solutions, rather than just Marcus who was handy with computers. The drive to the shop felt different somehow, even though I was taking the same route I'd driven hundreds of times before. My Honda Civic passed the same landmarks, The same coffee shop where I'd grabbed breakfast, the same intersection where construction had been going on for the better part of 2 years. But everything felt charged with new significance, as if the revelation at yesterday's family reunion had somehow altered the fundamental nature of reality itself. Tony Rodriguez was already under the hood of a 2008 Chevy Malibu when I walked into the garage, his weathered hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been solving mechanical problems for longer than I'd been alive. He glanced up as I approached, taking in my unusually professional appearance with raised eyebrows. "Well, look at you," he said, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better decades. "Either you're interviewing for a job somewhere fancy, or that family reunion yesterday went very differently than expected." I'd been dreading this conversation all morning, trying to figure out how to explain to Tony that the part-time mechanic he'd been mentoring for 3 years was actually running a multi-million-dollar company. Tony had become something like a second father to me, and the thought of disappointing him, or changing the dynamic of our relationship was almost unbearable. "Actually," I said, leaning against the workbench where he kept his diagnostic equipment, "the reunion got complicated in ways I didn't anticipate." Tony set down his wrench and gave me his full attention. In all the time I'd known him, he'd never been one for small talk or beating around the bush. He had a gift for cutting straight to the heart of whatever was troubling you, usually with a directness that was both uncomfortable and exactly what you needed to hear. "Complicated how?" he asked. So I told him everything. About Phoenix Digital Solutions, about the contracts and the employees and the office building downtown, about the choice I'd made to keep my professional life separate from everything else, including my Saturday mornings at the shop, about Jennifer Chen's recognition and the way my carefully constructed double life had unraveled in front of 43 members of the Rivera family. Tony listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable as I explained how I'd built a cybersecurity empire while pretending to be nothing more than a part-time computer repair guy. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, studying me with the same intensity he usually reserved for diagnosing particularly stubborn engine problems. "So let me get this straight," he said finally. "For 3 years, you've been coming in here every Saturday, learning how to rebuild transmissions and diagnose electrical problems, while secretly running a company that's worth millions of dollars." "That's about the size of it," I said, bracing myself for whatever came next. "And you kept working here because you enjoyed it, not because you needed the money, right? And all those times I offered to pay you more, or suggested you might want to look for full-time work somewhere with better benefits, you just smiled and said you were happy with the arrangement." I nodded, feeling heat creep up my neck. When he put it like that, it sounded almost cruel, letting him worry about my financial future when I was already more secure than most people could ever hope to be. Tony started laughing then, a deep, genuine sound that echoed off the concrete walls of the garage. "Son," he said, shaking his head, "that is either the most humble thing I've ever heard, or the most elaborate practical joke in the history of the automotive repair industry." "It's not a joke," I said quietly. "I know it's not," Tony replied, his laughter fading into something that looked like pride, "and that's what makes it so remarkable. You could have bought your own chain of auto shops by now, could have set yourself up as some kind of automotive industry mogul. Instead, you kept coming in here every Saturday, getting your hands dirty, learning skills you didn't need to learn, just because you wanted to understand how things worked." Relief flooded through me, so intense it was almost dizzying. I'd been terrified that Tony would feel betrayed by my deception, that he'd see my hidden success as some kind of elaborate lie. Instead, he seemed almost impressed by the commitment I'd shown to learning his trade, despite having no economic incentive to do so. "The thing is," I said, "everything I've learned here has made me better at what I do professionally. The diagnostic process, the way you approach complex problems, the patience required to trace a fault through an entire system, all of that translates directly to cybersecurity work." Tony nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense. Both jobs are about finding things that are broken and figuring out how to fix them. Whether it's a bad alternator or a security breach, the process is pretty similar." Gather information, form hypotheses, test solutions, keep refining until you solve the problem. Exactly, I said, grateful that he understood. Plus, there's something grounding about working with your hands, about creating something tangible instead of just moving data around on computer screens. So what happens now? Tony asked. Are you still going to keep coming in on Saturdays, or is your secret identity blown for good? It was a fair question, and one I'd been wrestling with since Jennifer Chen's phone call the night before. The Martinez Industries contract would require my full attention for the foreseeable future. Phoenix Digital Solutions was about to grow from a regional success story into a major player in the national cybersecurity market. The demands on my time were going to increase exponentially, and I wasn't sure how I'd balance everything. I want to keep coming, I said honestly, but I'm not sure how practical that's going to be. My company just got offered a contract that's going to require hiring 50 more employees in the next 6 months. I'm going to be traveling more, spending more time in boardrooms and conference calls. Tony was quiet for a moment, then reached into the toolbox beside him and pulled out a socket wrench that had seen decades of use. You know what this is? He asked, holding it up. A 3/8 drive socket wrench, I said, confused by the apparent non sequitur. It's a tool, Tony said. A good tool, one that served me well for probably 20 years, but it's still just a tool. The value isn't in the wrench itself, it's in knowing when and how to use it properly. He set the wrench down and looked at me directly. Success is the same way, it's just a tool. The question isn't whether you have it, but what you choose to do with it. I understood what he was getting at, but I wasn't sure how it applied to my current situation. Meaning what, exactly? Meaning that money and contracts and office buildings are just tools, Tony said. They're not who you are, they're resources you can use to accomplish things that matter to you. The Marcus who walked in here 3 years ago, curious about how engines worked, and eager to learn something new, that person is still who you are underneath all the business success. He was right, of course. The revelation at the family reunion had forced me to confront the fact that I'd been defining myself by what I hid, rather than what I accomplished. I'd become so focused on maintaining the separation between my professional and personal lives that I'd lost sight of the fact that both versions of myself were equally real, equally valid. The other thing, Tony continued, is that this place has been here for 38 years. I've seen a lot of people come and go, some who started with nothing and built something significant, others who had everything handed to them and managed to mess it up anyway. The ones who stay grounded, who remember where they came from and what really matters, those are the ones who find real satisfaction in their success. And you think working here helps with that? I think working anywhere that keeps you connected to the fundamentals helps with that, Tony said. Whether it's fixing cars, or building computers, or growing vegetables in your backyard, there's something valuable about doing work that produces tangible results. It reminds you that beneath all the complexity of modern life, most problems have straightforward solutions if you're willing to put in the effort to find them. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Maria Santos, a single mother who'd been bringing her 2005 Honda Accord to Tony for repairs for the past several years. She worked 2 jobs to support her 3 kids, and Tony had always made sure to give her fair prices and honest assessments of what actually needed to be fixed versus what could wait another few months. "Morning, Tony," she said, parking her car near the bay door. "The check engine light came on again yesterday, and it's making that weird noise when I accelerate." "Morning, Maria," Tony replied, grabbing his diagnostic scanner. "Same noise as last time, or something new?" As I watched Tony begin his methodical examination of Maria's car, asking questions about when the symptoms appeared, and under what conditions, I was struck by the similarity between his approach and the process I used when a client called with a cybersecurity emergency. The tools were different, but the methodology was identical. Gather information, test hypotheses, isolate variables, develop solutions. More importantly, I was reminded of why this work mattered in ways that went beyond financial compensation. Maria depended on her car to get to both her jobs, to take her kids to school and doctor appointments, to maintain the basic functionality of her life. When Tony fixed her engine problems, he wasn't just restoring mechanical function, he was preserving her ability to take care of her family. The parallel to my cybersecurity work was obvious once I thought about it. When Phoenix Digital Solutions helped a company recover from a ransomware attack, we weren't just restoring computer systems, we were protecting jobs, preserving trust, maintaining the digital infrastructure that modern businesses depended on. The scale was different, but the fundamental purpose was the same: solving problems that mattered to real people. "Marcus," Tony called from underneath Maria's car, "can you hand me that code reader? I want to see what the computer's telling us before we start guessing about solutions." I grabbed the diagnostic tool and knelt beside him, watching as he connected it to the car's onboard computer system. The device immediately began displaying error codes, cryptic combinations of letters and numbers that would be meaningless to most people, but told a clear story to anyone who understood the language. P0420, Tony read from the screen. "Catalyst system efficiency below threshold. Probably need a new catalytic converter, but let's confirm with some additional tests before we give Maria the bad news about the cost." As we worked through the diagnostic process, I found myself thinking about the conversation I'd had with Jennifer Chen the night before. The Martinez Industries contract represented an opportunity to scale Phoenix Digital Solutions to a level I'd never imagined possible. But it also meant stepping fully into the role of CEO, embracing the public visibility that came with running a major corporation. The question wasn't whether I was capable of handling the increased responsibility, the question was whether I was ready to give up the anonymity that had allowed me to maintain connections like this one with Tony, relationships that existed outside the context of my professional achievements. "So what's the verdict?" Maria asked when we emerged from under her car. Tony delivered the diagnosis with the same straightforward honesty he brought to everything else. The catalytic converter was failing, which explained both the check engine light and the performance issues she'd been experiencing. The repair would cost $800, money she probably didn't have readily available but couldn't afford not to spend if she wanted to keep the car running reliably. "I can break the payment up into installments if that helps," Tony offered, as he always did for customers facing expensive repairs on tight budgets. "No interest. Just pay what you can when you can, until it's covered." Maria's relief was visible. "That would be amazing, Tony. I can probably manage $200 this week, and the rest over the next month or so." "That works for me," Tony said, already making notes in his scheduling book about when to order the part and schedule the installation. After Maria left, promising to bring the car back on Wednesday for the repair, Tony and I spent the rest of the morning working on a brake job for Mrs. Henderson, the retired teacher who lived 3 blocks away and had been driving the same 1998 Buick Century for the past 24 years. It was comfortable, familiar work, the kind of methodical problem-solving that had always appealed to me. But as we worked, I found myself thinking about the broader implications of the choice I was facing. The Martinez Industries contract would require Phoenix Digital Solutions to expand rapidly, which meant hiring more people, which meant creating more jobs, which meant supporting more families. The economic impact of accepting the contract would extend far beyond my own bank account. At the same time, there was something to be said for maintaining the balance I'd achieved between professional success and personal authenticity. Working at Rodriguez Auto Repair had kept me grounded, reminded me that meaningful work didn't always require advanced degrees or sophisticated technology. Sometimes the most important problems were the simplest ones: helping Maria keep her car running so she could support her kids, or making sure Mrs. Henderson's brakes were safe for her weekly trips to the grocery store. "Penny for your thoughts," Tony said, as we finished installing Mrs. Henderson's new brake pads. "Just trying to figure out what comes next," I said honestly. "The opportunity I mentioned, it's bigger than anything I've handled before. If I take it, everything changes. The company grows, My visibility increases. The demands on my time multiply exponentially. Sounds like success, Tony observed. It is success, I agreed. The question is whether it's the kind of success I actually want or just the kind I'm supposed to want. Tony wiped his hands on his rag and leaned against the workbench, giving me his full attention. When I started this shop 38 years ago, he said, I had dreams of building a chain, maybe franchising the concept, becoming some kind of automotive repair mogul. Had investors interested, business plans drawn up, the whole 9 yards. What happened? I realized that what I really enjoyed wasn't running a business empire, Tony said. It was fixing cars, working with my hands, solving problems, building relationships with customers who trusted me to take care of something important to them. All that expansion would have taken me further away from the actual work I loved and closer to conference rooms and financial reports. So you stayed small by choice, I stayed focused, Tony corrected. There's a difference between small and focused. I built exactly the business I wanted to run, serving the community I wanted to serve, doing the work I found meaningful. That's not settling for less, this choosing what matters most. The wisdom in his words was obvious, but applying it to my own situation was more complicated. Phoenix Digital Solutions had grown organically, driven by demand for services rather than by my own ambition. Each new contract, each additional employee, each expansion of our capabilities had been a response to problems that needed solving rather than a deliberate pursuit of wealth or status. But the Martinez Industries opportunity was different. It represented a conscious choice to scale beyond what felt natural, to pursue growth for its own sake rather than simply responding to market demand. The financial rewards would be substantial, but so would the personal costs. The thing is, I said, I'm not sure I can turn down a $25 million annual contract just because it might interfere with my Saturday morning routine. Tony laughed. 25 million? Son, that's not just interfering with your Saturday routine, that's rewriting your entire life story. He was right, of course. The Martinez Industries contract wasn't just about money, it was about transformation. Accepting it would mean fully embracing my role as a major player in the cybersecurity industry, with all the visibility, responsibility, and complexity that came with that position. But here's the thing, Tony continued. Money is a tool, remember? The question isn't whether $25 million is worth having. The question is what you plan to do with it once you have it. That afternoon, I drove to the Phoenix Digital Solutions office building for the first time since the family reunion revelation. The gleaming lobby, the sophisticated security systems, the bustling activity of 52 employees working to solve complex technical problems, all of it felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, like putting on clothes that fit perfectly but somehow felt different than they had before. Sarah Kim, my operations manager, was waiting in the conference room with quarterly reports and strategic planning documents. She'd been with the company since the early days, when we were operating out of a shared workspace downtown and taking whatever contracts we could find. Over the past 3 years, she'd proven herself invaluable at managing the day-to-day operations that allowed me to focus on technical innovation and client relationships. So, she said as I settled into my chair at the head of the conference table, I hear congratulations are in order. Jennifer Chen called this morning to confirm the details of the Martinez Industries proposal. $25 million annually, with options for expansion. That's substantial. It's an incredible opportunity, I agreed, but it's also going to require major changes in how we operate. We'd need to double our workforce, expand our office space, probably bring in additional management layers to handle the increased complexity. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. She'd been through enough growth phases with the company to understand both the opportunities and the challenges that came with rapid scaling. The question is whether we want to be that kind of company, she said, whether we want to make the transition from boutique consultancy to major corporate player. It was the same question I'd been wrestling with all morning, framed in slightly different terms. Phoenix Digital Solutions had succeeded precisely because we'd remained agile and focused, able to provide personalized attention to each client and innovative solutions to complex problems. Growing to the size required by the Martinez Industries contract would inevitably change our culture, our capabilities, and our relationship with the work itself. "What's your gut feeling?" I asked Sarah. Her instincts about the business had been consistently reliable, and I valued her perspective on strategic decisions. "Honestly," she said, "I think we're at a crossroads. We can either stay roughly the size we are now, continuing to serve mid-market clients with the kind of personalized attention that's made us successful, or we can make the leap to becoming a major player in the industry. Both paths have merit, but they lead to very different destinations." She was right, and the choice felt heavier than it had any right to. 3 years ago, when I dropped out of college to focus on building Phoenix Digital Solutions, the decision had been relatively simple. I'd seen an opportunity to solve problems that mattered, and I'd pursued it with single-minded focus. But now, faced with success beyond what I'd originally imagined, the path forward was much less clear. "There's another factor to consider," Sarah continued. "If we turn down the Martinez Industries contract, someone else is going to take it, and whoever that is, will have the resources to compete with us for other major clients going forward. This might be a case where standing still means falling behind." That was a sobering thought. The cybersecurity industry was becoming increasingly competitive, with established players and well-funded startups, all vying for the same pool of high-value contracts. Phoenix Digital Solutions had succeeded by being innovative and responsive, but maintaining our market position would require continued growth and investment. On the other hand, I said, taking the contract means fundamentally changing who we are as a company. We'd need to hire people we don't know, implement processes we haven't tested, take on levels of responsibility we haven't handled before. There's a real risk that we could lose the culture and capabilities that made us successful in the first place. Sarah leaned back in her chair, studying me with the same analytical approach she brought to operational challenges. "This isn't really about the business, is it?" she said finally. "This is about what kind of person you want to be, what kind of life you want to live." Her observation hit closer to the truth than I was entirely comfortable acknowledging. The Martinez Industries decision was fundamentally about identity, about whether I was ready to fully embrace the role of CEO of a major corporation, with all the visibility and complexity that came with that position. For 3 years, I'd been able to maintain a careful balance between professional achievement and personal authenticity. I'd built a successful company while preserving my connection to simpler, more fundamental forms of work. I'd accumulated wealth while avoiding the lifestyle inflation and status consciousness that often accompanied financial success. But the Martinez Industries contract would make that balance much harder to maintain. $25 million in annual revenue would put Phoenix Digital Solutions firmly in the spotlight of industry attention. I'd be expected to attend conferences, speak at events, participate in the kind of professional networking that I'd successfully avoided up to this point. "Maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing," Sarah suggested, reading my expression. "You've got valuable insights about cybersecurity, about building resilient systems, about leading teams through complex technical challenges. Sharing that knowledge more widely could have real impact beyond just our client base." She had a point. One of the frustrations I'd experienced over the past year was watching other companies struggle with security problems that we'd already solved, or seeing industry best practices that lagged behind what we'd developed through practical experience. If growing Phoenix Digital Solutions meant having a platform to influence broader industry practices, that could be worthwhile beyond the financial rewards. Plus, Sarah added with a slight smile, $25 million annually means we could afford to be a lot more selective about our other clients. We could take on pro bono work for nonprofits, maybe develop some of the innovative security tools you've been talking about without worrying about immediate commercial viability. That was an appealing prospect. For months, I'd been sketching out ideas for next-generation security technologies that could democratize cybersecurity protection for smaller businesses and individuals. With the financial cushion provided by the Martinez Industries contract, Phoenix Digital Solutions could afford to invest in research and development that might not have immediate commercial applications but could have significant long-term impact. The conversation continued for another hour, covering operational details, staffing requirements, timeline considerations, and strategic implications. By the time we finished, the basic framework for accepting the Martinez Industries contract was clear. We'd need to hire aggressively, expand our office space, implement new management structures, and fundamentally transform the company's scale and scope of operations. But the decision itself remained unresolved. As I sat in my office afterward, looking out at the Denver skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, I realized that all the rational analysis in the world couldn't make this choice for me. The numbers were compelling. The opportunity was unprecedented, and the strategic logic was sound. But ultimately, the decision came down to what kind of person I wanted to be, and what kind of life I wanted to live. My phone buzzed with a text message from Louis, my cousin who'd been at the family reunion the day before. Saw the news about Martinez Industries on the business section of the Denver Post website, he wrote. Says they're announcing a major cybersecurity partnership this week. I'm guessing that involves a certain family member, who shall remain nameless. Congratulations, Primo. You've earned it. I pulled up the article he was referring to, finding a brief item about Martinez Industries' recovery from their recent ransomware attack and their plans to implement comprehensive security protocols across all subsidiary companies. The piece didn't mention Phoenix Digital Solutions by name, but it confirmed that news of our potential partnership was already beginning to circulate in business media. The publicity was both gratifying and slightly terrifying. For 3 years, I'd operated in relative anonymity, building the company's reputation through word-of-mouth referrals and the quality of our work rather than through media attention or industry recognition. But accepting the Martinez Industries contract would inevitably change that, thrusting both Phoenix Digital Solutions and me personally into a much more visible role in the cybersecurity industry. As evening approached, I found myself driving not toward my apartment, but toward Rodriguez Auto Repair. Tony's truck was still in the parking lot, and I could see light coming from his small office in the back of the building, where he handled the administrative side of the business. I knocked on the doorframe and found him hunched over invoices and parts orders, the kind of paperwork that every small business owner had to handle, regardless of how much they enjoyed the actual work. Twice in one day, Tony said, looking up from his calculator. Either you're really struggling with that decision, or you forgot something this morning. Struggling with the decision, I admitted, settling into the folding chair across from his desk. The more I think about it, the more complicated it gets. Tony set aside his paperwork and gave me his full attention. Want to talk through it? So I did. I explained the scope of the Martinez Industries contract, the growth it would require, the visibility it would bring, the fundamental changes it would make to both Phoenix Digital Solutions and my personal life. I talked about the opportunity to influence industry practices, to create jobs, to solve problems on a larger scale. I also talked about my fears of losing the authenticity and groundedness that had kept me centered through 3 years of business growth. Tony listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making notes on a scrap of paper. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, studying the numbers he'd written down. $25 million, he said finally. That's serious money. Life-changing money. The kind of opportunity that might not come around twice. That's what makes it so difficult, I said. How do you turn down something like that? How do you look at an opportunity that could set up not just me, but my employees and their families, for decades to come, and decide it's not worth pursuing? You don't, Tony said simply. You don't turn down an opportunity like that unless you've got a damn good reason. The question is whether you've got a damn good reason. He was right, of course. The rational choice was obvious: accept the contract, grow the company, embrace the success that most entrepreneurs would kill for. The hesitation I was feeling wasn't based on logic or careful analysis. It was based on fear of change, on attachment to a way of life that had served me well, but might not be sustainable, as Phoenix Digital Solutions continued to grow. Here's what I think, Tony continued. I think you're afraid that success is going to change who you are, make you into someone you don't recognize, or don't like, and that's a reasonable fear. I've seen it happen to people. But I've also seen people who manage to stay true to themselves, despite achieving more than they ever thought possible. What's the difference? The ones who stay grounded, Tony said, they remember that success is just a tool. It's not who they are, it's just something they can use to accomplish things that matter to them. They don't let the money, or the recognition, or the status symbols define their identity. They keep doing work that matters, maintaining relationships that ground them, pursuing interests that feed their soul. I thought about that as I drove home through the quiet Denver streets, past the coffee shops and bookstores, and small businesses that made up the fabric of daily life. Tony's wisdom was simple but profound. Success was only dangerous if you let it become your identity, instead of just one aspect of who you were. The next morning, I woke up knowing what I was going to do. Tuesday morning arrived, with the kind of crystalline clarity that only comes after you've finally stopped wrestling with a decision and committed to a path forward. I stood in my apartment's small kitchen, brewing coffee in the same cheap machine I'd owned since college, and felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in days. The Martinez Industries contract was sitting on my laptop in the next room, reviewed, revised, and ready for my signature. But first, I had some phone calls to make. The first call went to Jennifer Chen, who picked up on the second ring, despite the early hour. Her voice carried the crisp efficiency of someone who'd been awake for hours, probably dealing with security protocols and system updates that couldn't wait for normal business hours. "Mr. Rivera," she said, and I could hear the anticipation in her tone. "I was hoping to hear from you today. Have you had a chance to review the contract terms?" "I have," I said, settling into the worn armchair that faced my apartment's single window, "and I'm calling to accept the offer. Phoenix Digital Solutions will be honored to serve as Martinez Industries' exclusive cybersecurity partner." The silence that followed lasted just long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. Then Jennifer's voice returned with barely contained excitement. "That's fantastic news. I can't tell you how relieved our entire executive team will be, after what we went through with the ransomware attack, knowing we have your expertise protecting our systems going forward. Well, it's going to let us all sleep better at night." We spent the next 20 minutes discussing implementation timelines, staffing requirements, and the logistics of scaling Phoenix Digital Solutions to handle such a massive contract. Jennifer had clearly done her homework, understanding that taking on Martinez Industries and its 17 subsidiary companies would require us to nearly triple our workforce and significantly expand our operational capabilities. "There's one thing I want to make clear from the outset," I said as our conversation wound toward its conclusion. "Phoenix Digital Solutions has always operated on the principle that good security comes from understanding systems holistically, not just implementing technological solutions. We're going to need complete transparency from your IT departments, unrestricted access to your network architecture, and the authority to recommend changes that might seem disruptive in the short term, but will provide better protection long term." "You'll have whatever you need," Jennifer assured me. "After what we've been through, our board is committed to doing whatever it takes to prevent another catastrophe. Your reputation speaks for itself, and frankly, we're prepared to follow your recommendations, even if we don't fully understand the technical details." After ending the call with Jennifer, I immediately dialed Sarah Kim's number. As operations manager, she'd be the one tasked with actually implementing the massive organizational changes required by the Martinez contract. Her response was characteristically practical and slightly overwhelming. "Okay," she said after I delivered the news, "so we need to hire 35 new employees in the next 4 months, lease additional office space, establish new project management protocols, implement enterprise-level HR systems, and probably bring in at least 3 new senior managers who have experience with operations of this scale. Did I miss anything?" "Probably several things we haven't thought of yet," I admitted, "but we've handled rapid growth before. This is just more rapid and more growth than we've dealt with previously." Sarah laughed, a sound that mixed excitement with the kind of controlled panic that comes with facing an enormous challenge. "Marcus, this isn't just more of what we've been doing. This is transforming Phoenix Digital Solutions from a regional consultancy into a major player in the national cybersecurity market. We're going to be competing with companies that have been around for decades, serving clients who expect the kind of infrastructure and resources we've never had to provide before." She was right, of course. The Martinez Industries contract represented a fundamental shift in the company's identity and capabilities. But as I listened to Sarah outline the challenges we'd be facing, I found myself energized rather than intimidated. For 3 years, we'd been solving problems and building solutions on a relatively small scale. The opportunity to apply our methodologies and innovations to challenges of this magnitude was exactly the kind of work I'd started the company to pursue. "I know it's a massive undertaking," I said, "but I also know we have the team and the expertise to handle it. More importantly, we have the chance to influence how an entire industry approaches cybersecurity. The solutions we develop for Martinez Industries are going to become case studies, best practices that other companies adopt. We're not just taking on a big contract, we're helping to define the future of corporate security." After hanging up with Sarah, I sat in my quiet apartment for a few minutes, processing the magnitude of what I'd just committed to. In accepting the Martinez Industries contract, I wasn't just expanding Phoenix Digital Solutions, I was fundamentally altering the trajectory of my own life. The anonymity I'd cultivated, the careful balance between professional achievement and personal authenticity, the Saturday mornings at Rodriguez Auto Repair, all of that was about to change in ways I couldn't fully predict. But as I thought about the challenges ahead, I realized that Tony Rodriguez's advice from the previous day had crystallized into something approaching wisdom. Success was indeed just a tool, and the Martinez Industries contract was an opportunity to use that tool in service of something larger than my own comfort or convenience. The cybersecurity protocols we develop wouldn't just protect one company's data, they'd become models that other organizations could adopt to protect their employees, their customers, and their stakeholders. My phone buzzed with a text message from Rebecca, my sister who'd been so dismissive just 3 days earlier at the family reunion. Saw the news about Martinez Industries in the business section. She wrote, "David says they're announcing their new security partnership this afternoon. I'm guessing this involves a certain brother whose success I completely underestimated. I'm proud of you, Marcus, and I'm sorry it took so long for me to see what was right in front of me." The message was followed by another one from David himself. "Rebecca showed me the article. I can't believe I spent months worrying about job security, while my wife's brother was literally the person saving our company. I owe you more than an apology, I owe you a debt of gratitude I'll probably never be able to repay. Thank you for not holding my stupidity against Martinez Industries when you were deciding whether to take the contract." Reading those messages, I felt a complex mix of satisfaction and sadness. The vindication was gratifying. After years of being treated like the family disappointment, it was nice to have my achievements recognized and acknowledged. But there was also something melancholy about the realization that my family's perception of me had changed so dramatically based solely on their newfound awareness of my financial success. The third call I made was to Tony Rodriguez, catching him as he was opening the shop for another day of diagnosing engine problems and helping customers keep their vehicles running safely. His voice carried the familiar warmth that had made our Saturday morning conversations such a grounding force in my life. "Well," he said, after I explained my decision to accept the Martinez contract, "sounds like you've got some interesting months ahead of you. 35 new employees, expanded office space, national-level cybersecurity operations. That's going to keep you pretty busy." "It is," I agreed. "Which brings me to the difficult part of this conversation. I'm not sure how realistic it's going to be for me to keep coming in on Saturday mornings, at least not while we're in the middle of this major expansion." Tony was quiet for a moment, and I could picture him standing in his cluttered office, probably holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, while he dealt with parts orders and scheduling conflicts. "That's disappointing," he said finally, "but not surprising. Success has its own demands, and building something significant requires sacrifice. The question is whether you're giving up something temporarily or permanently." "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I hope it's temporary. Working at the shop has been important to me. It's kept me grounded, reminded me what real work looks like, given me perspective on what actually matters. I don't want to lose that." "Then don't," Tony said simply. "Maybe you can't come in every Saturday for the next 6 months while you're hiring and expanding and implementing new systems. But that doesn't mean you have to give up the connection entirely. Maybe it's once a month instead of every week, or maybe it's helping out during busy periods when we need an extra pair of hands. The point is to maintain the relationship, even if the frequency changes." His practical wisdom was exactly what I needed to hear. The binary thinking that had been troubling me, either maintain everything exactly as it was, or abandon the auto shop entirely, gave way to a more nuanced understanding of how to balance competing priorities. Growth didn't have to mean abandonment, and success didn't have to require severing the connections that had helped create it. "There's something else," Tony said, "something I've been thinking about since our conversation yesterday. You've got this opportunity to influence an entire industry, to develop security practices that could protect thousands of companies and millions of people. That's significant work, the kind of impact most people never get the chance to have. Don't let fear of change keep you from pursuing something that could make a real difference in the world." After ending the call with Tony, I spent the morning reviewing the Martinez Industries contract one final time, making sure I understood every clause and obligation. The document was comprehensive, outlining not just financial terms and deliverables, but also expectations for reporting, communication protocols, performance metrics, and long-term strategic planning. It was, in every sense, a contract between equal orneous two major organizations committing to a partnership that would benefit both parties while advancing broader industry practices. At precisely 2 o'clock, I walked into the downtown offices of Martinez Industries for what Jennifer Chen had described as a simple contract signing and introductory meeting. What I found instead was a conference room filled with the company's entire executive leadership team, including CEO Robert Martinez himself, along with several members of the board of directors. "Rivera," CEO Martinez said, standing to shake my hand, "it's an honor to finally meet you in person. Jennifer has been singing your praises for months, but after the work you did to help us recover from the ransomware attack, I had to see for myself the person who'd accomplish what our previous security consultants told us was impossible." The meeting that followed was unlike any business interaction I'd ever experienced. Rather than focusing solely on contract terms and implementation schedules, the Martinez Industries leadership team was genuinely interested in understanding Phoenix Digital Solutions' methodology and philosophy. They asked detailed questions about our diagnostic processes, our approach to risk assessment, our strategies for balancing security with operational efficiency. More importantly, they listened to the answers with the kind of attention usually reserved for matters of life and death, which in a sense, they were missed as the company's survival had depended on our ability to rebuild their security infrastructure quickly and effectively, and their future growth would be directly tied to our success in preventing similar attacks. What impressed us most, Jennifer Chen explained to the assembled executives, was Mr. Rivera's team's ability to not just fix our immediate problems, but to redesign our entire security architecture in a way that actually improved our operational efficiency. Most cybersecurity solutions create friction, slow down processes, make it harder for employees to do their jobs. Phoenix Digital Solutions found ways to make us more secure and more efficient. Simultaneously, as the meeting progressed, I found myself discussing not just the technical aspects of cybersecurity, but the broader implications of digital transformation for traditional industries. The executives around the table were wrestling with challenges that went far beyond preventing ransomware attacks. They were trying to figure out how to maintain competitive advantage in an increasingly digital marketplace while protecting themselves against constantly evolving threats. The thing that sets Phoenix Digital Solutions apart, I explained, is that we don't see cybersecurity as something that gets bolted onto existing systems as an afterthought. We approach it as an integral part of how modern businesses operate, something that should enhance rather than hinder your ability to serve customers and achieve strategic objectives. CEO Martinez leaned forward, clearly intrigued. Can you give us a specific example of what that looks like in practice? Absolutely, I said, pulling up one of the case studies we developed during our work with Martinez Industries. When we analyzed your customer database architecture, we found that the security vulnerabilities that allowed the ransomware attack were actually symptoms of deeper inefficiencies in how customer information was stored and accessed. By redesigning the database structure to be more secure, we also eliminated redundancies that were slowing down customer service response times and creating opportunities for human error. The room was completely silent as I walked through the technical details, but I could see understanding dawning on several faces. What we'd accomplished wasn't just fixing a security problem, we'd used security improvements as an opportunity to optimize business processes in ways that created measurable value for the company. So our investment in cybersecurity actually pays for itself through operational improvements, one of the board members observed. In many cases, yes, I confirmed. Obviously, the primary value of good security is preventing catastrophic losses from successful attacks. But when security measures are designed thoughtfully, they often reveal opportunities to streamline operations, improve data quality, and enhance customer experiences. The contract signing itself was almost anticlimactic after such an engaging discussion. CEO Martinez and I each signed multiple copies of the agreement while photographers from the company's communications department captured the moment for what would become a significant announcement in industry publications. But as I walked out of the Martinez Industries building that afternoon, carrying my own copy of a contract worth $25 million annually, I wasn't thinking about money or publicity or the transformation that Phoenix Digital Solutions was about to undergo. I was thinking about the responsibility I'd just accepted, the obligation to prove that a small company from Denver could compete with established industry leaders while maintaining the innovation and agility that had made us successful in the first place. The drive back to the Phoenix Digital Solutions office gave me time to process what had just happened. In the space of a single meeting, I'd committed to growing the company by nearly 300%, hiring dozens of new employees, and taking on cybersecurity responsibilities for organizations that served hundreds of thousands of customers. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Sarah Kim was waiting in my office when I arrived, along with our 3 senior managers and a stack of organizational charts, hiring plans, and expansion timelines that represented weeks of preparation for this moment. So, she said with a grin that mixed excitement with barely controlled panic, "I'm guessing the meeting went well." I set the signed contract on the conference table where everyone could see it. Phoenix Digital Solutions just became the exclusive cybersecurity partner for Martinez Industries and all 17 subsidiary companies. We have 4 months to hire 35 new employees, 6 months to implement comprehensive security protocols across their entire network infrastructure, and approximately forever to make sure we never let them down. The celebration that followed was subdued by our collective awareness of the challenges ahead. While we were all thrilled by the opportunity the Martinez contract represented, we also understood that success would require executing flawlessly on a scale we'd never attempted before. There would be no room for the kind of improvisation and rapid adaptation that had characterized our growth up to this point. We needed systems, processes, and structures that could handle enterprise-level complexity. Over the next several hours, we worked through preliminary staffing plans, identifying the specific roles we needed to fill and the qualifications required for each position. The conversation was detailed and sometimes overwhelming, covering everything from senior cybersecurity engineers who could design network architectures for Fortune 500 companies to administrative assistants who could manage the scheduling complexities that came with serving multiple large clients simultaneously. The good news, observed Mike Chen, our head of technical operations, is that the Martinez Industries contract is going to make Phoenix Digital Solutions extremely attractive to top-tier talent. People who might not have considered working for a regional consultancy are going to be very interested in joining a company that's landed this kind of high-profile client. He was right. The cybersecurity industry was highly competitive when it came to recruiting experienced professionals, but the Martinez Industries partnership would give us credibility and resources that had been beyond our reach as a smaller company. We'd be able to offer competitive salaries, comprehensive benefits, and the opportunity to work on challenging projects that could define industry best practices. The challenging news, Sarah added with characteristic pragmatism, is that we need to hire 35 people without compromising the culture and standards that have made us successful. Every new employee needs to understand our methodology, embrace our values, and contribute to the collaborative environment that's allowed us to innovate so effectively. That was perhaps the most critical challenge we'd be facing. Phoenix Digital Solutions had succeeded precisely because we'd maintained a small company culture that encouraged creative problem-solving and rapid decision-making. Scaling that culture to accommodate a workforce nearly 3 times our current size would require careful attention to hiring, training, and organizational structure. As the afternoon stretched into evening, our planning session evolved into something approaching a strategic retreat. We discussed not just the immediate requirements of the Martinez Industries contract, but the long-term implications for Phoenix Digital Solutions' identity and market position. Were we becoming a different kind of company, or simply a larger version of what we'd always been? I said as we reviewed our final notes and action items, we're becoming the company we were always meant to become. For 3 years, we've been developing expertise and methodologies that were ready for challenges of this magnitude. The Martinez Industries contract isn't changing our fundamental approach mentals, it's giving us the opportunity to apply that approach to problems worthy of our capabilities. The next few weeks passed in a blur of job interviews, lease negotiations, equipment purchases, and organizational restructuring. Sarah Kim proved invaluable in managing the countless details that accompanied rapid expansion, while our senior managers took on increased responsibilities for training new employees and establishing operational protocols that could handle enterprise-level complexity. By the time we were ready to begin implementation of the Martinez Industries security overhaul, Phoenix Digital Solutions had grown from 52 employees to 78, with office space that had nearly doubled and technological capabilities that far exceeded what we'd been able to offer just months earlier. The transformation was remarkable, but what surprised me most was how natural it felt, as if we'd been preparing for this moment without fully realizing it. The first major test came 6 weeks after signing the contract, when Martinez Industries experienced what appeared to be another attempted cyber attack. This time, however, our monitoring systems detected the intrusion within minutes, automatically implemented containment protocols, and traced the attack vector back to its source before any data was compromised. What would have been a catastrophic security breach under their previous systems became a minor incident that was resolved without impacting business operations. The call I received from Jennifer Chen that evening was effusive in its gratitude and relief. "Marcus," she said, "I can't thank you enough. 6 months ago, an attack like this would have shut down our entire network for days, possibly weeks. Today, most of our employees didn't even know anything had happened. The security infrastructure you've built isn't just protecting our data, it's allowing us to operate with confidence we've never had before." That call, more than any financial milestone or industry recognition, validated the decision to accept the Martinez Industries contract. We weren't just providing cybersecurity services, we were enabling an entire organization to pursue its mission without the constant fear of digital disruption. The work we were doing mattered in ways that extended far beyond our own success. 3 months after the contract signing, Phoenix Digital Solutions received its first major industry award, recognition as Cybersecurity Innovation Company of the Year from the National Technology Security Association. The ceremony was held in San Francisco, attended by hundreds of industry leaders and covered by major technology publications. Standing on the stage, accepting an award that represented not just our technical achievements but our success in scaling innovative solutions to enterprise-level challenges, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this point. The college dropout who'd started fixing computers in his dorm room, the family reunion where my success had been revealed, the decision to embrace growth while maintaining authenticity, all of it had led to this moment of recognition and validation. But what struck me most as I looked out at the audience of cybersecurity professionals was the realization that this award represented not an endpoint but a beginning. Phoenix Digital Solutions had proven we could compete with established industry leaders while maintaining our innovative approach and collaborative culture. The Martinez Industries contract had given us the resources and credibility to pursue even more ambitious projects, to influence industry practices on a national scale, to develop security solutions that could protect not just individual companies but entire sectors of the economy. The speech I gave that evening focused not on our technical achievements but on the responsibility that came with success in cybersecurity. Every system we protected, every attack we prevented, every vulnerability we identified and addressed, all of it contributed to a more secure digital infrastructure that benefited countless individuals and organizations who would never know our names. The greatest measure of success in cybersecurity, I concluded, isn't the awards we win or the contracts we sign, it's the attacks that never happen, the data that stays protected, the businesses that can operate with confidence because someone somewhere is working to keep them safe. That's the real work we do, and it's work that matters more than any individual achievement or recognition. The standing ovation that followed was gratifying, but what meant more were the conversations afterward with other cybersecurity professionals who were facing similar challenges in balancing rapid growth with innovative practices. Phoenix Digital Solutions had become a model for how smaller companies could compete in enterprise markets without losing the agility and creativity that made them effective. 6 months after the Martinez Industries contract signing, Phoenix Digital Solutions announced its second major partnership, this time with a healthcare network that served over 2 million patients across 4 states. The contract was worth $18 million annually and would require us to develop specialized security protocols for protecting medical records and ensuring regulatory compliance in one of the most heavily regulated industries in the country. The announcement generated significant media attention, with several technology publications featuring profiles of Phoenix Digital Solutions and my own journey from college dropout to industry leader. The coverage was largely positive, focusing on our innovative approaches to cybersecurity and our success in scaling without sacrificing quality or culture. But the article that meant the most to me appeared in a small Denver business journal, featuring a photograph of me working under the hood of a car at Rodriguez Auto Repair. The piece explored how successful entrepreneurs maintained connections to their roots, using my Saturday morning routine as an example of staying grounded despite rapid professional growth. Tony Rodriguez was quoted extensively in the article, explaining how mechanical problem-solving skills translated to cybersecurity diagnostics and why hands-on work remained valuable even for people who'd achieved significant business success. Marcus understands that fixing a car and protecting a computer network require the same fundamental approach, Tony observed. You gather information, form hypotheses, test solutions, and keep refining until you solve the problem. The tools are different, but the thinking is identical. Reading that article while sitting in my expanded office overlooking downtown Denver, I realized that Tony had been right about everything. Success was indeed just a tool, valuable only insofar as it enabled you to accomplish things that mattered. The Martinez Industries contract had given Phoenix Digital Solutions resources and credibility we'd never had before, but it hadn't changed our fundamental mission or our approach to solving complex problems. More importantly, growth hadn't required abandoning the connections and practices that had kept me grounded during the early years of building the company. I still spent Saturday mornings at Rodriguez Auto Repair, though less frequently than before. I still lived in the same one-bedroom apartment, though I'd upgraded some of the appliances and furniture. I still drove the same Honda Civic, though I'd had Tony help me rebuild the engine as a learning project. The family reunion that had started this entire journey felt like it had happened years rather than months ago. Rebecca and David had both become genuine supporters of Phoenix Digital Solutions, with David even serving as an informal liaison between our company and Martinez Industries on operational matters. The transformation in our relationships had been as dramatic as the growth of the business itself. But perhaps the most significant change was in my own understanding of what success actually meant. For years I'd defined it negatively. Its success was maintaining anonymity, avoiding expectations, keeping my achievements hidden from people who might judge or change their behavior toward me. The revelation at the family reunion had forced me to confront the limitations of that approach and embrace a more positive definition. True success, I'd learned, wasn't about what you avoided or hid from others. It was about what you contributed, what problems you solved, what value you created for people whose lives intersected with your work. Phoenix Digital Solutions had grown from a dorm room project into a nationally recognized cybersecurity company, not because I'd been clever about managing perceptions, but because we'd focused relentlessly on doing work that mattered. The Martinez Industries contract was just the beginning. As Phoenix Digital Solutions continued to grow and take on increasingly complex challenges, I knew there would be new decisions to make about balancing success with authenticity, expansion with culture, ambition with groundedness. But I also knew that the foundation was solid. We'd proven we could scale innovative solutions without losing sight of what made us effective in the first place. Standing at my office window as another Denver sunset painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple, I thought about the phone call I'd received that morning from a Fortune 100 company whose CEO had read about our work with Martinez Industries. They were interested in discussing a cybersecurity partnership that would dwarf even our current contracts, serving millions of customers and protecting infrastructure that was critical to national economic security. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd dreamed about when I'd first started Phoenix Digital Solutions, the chance to work on problems of genuine national significance while building something that would endure long beyond my own involvement. The scared college dropout who'd worried about family judgment and industry credibility had evolved into someone ready to take on challenges that could define the future of cybersecurity for entire industries. But as I prepared to leave the office and drive home through the familiar Denver streets, I knew exactly where I'd be on Saturday morning. Rodriguez Auto Repair would be opening for another day of diagnosing engine problems and helping people keep their vehicles running safely. Tony would be there with his coffee and his decades of accumulated wisdom about the relationship between good work and a meaningful life. And I'd be there too, getting my hands dirty with transmission fluid and brake dust, solving problems that mattered to people like Maria Santos who depended on her car to support her family. Because some connections were too important to sacrifice for success, and some lessons were too valuable to abandon for growth. The Marcus Rivera who'd walked into that family reunion 6 months ago, carrying the weight of hidden achievements and unrecognized potential, was gone forever. In his place was someone who understood that the best success was the kind you could share openly, work you could be proud of without reservation, achievements that created value for others while remaining true to your own deepest values. Phoenix Digital Solutions would continue growing, taking on larger contracts and more complex challenges. I'd continue learning both from the sophisticated technical problems we solved for major corporations and from the fundamental diagnostic principles I practiced every Saturday morning at the auto shop. The balance between ambition and authenticity, between professional achievement and personal groundedness, would continue evolving as circumstances changed and opportunities arose. But the foundation was solid now, built on the understanding that real success wasn't about what others thought of your achievements, but about what those achievements made possible for the people whose lives they touched. Whether we were protecting a Fortune 500 company's customer database or helping a single mother keep her car running safely, the work mattered because it served something larger than our own ambitions. That was the lesson the family reunion had taught me, the wisdom that had emerged from a moment of unwanted exposure and awkward revelation. Success wasn't something to hide or apologize for first, it was something to use responsibly, share generously, and build upon thoughtfully. The scared dropout who'd started this journey had finally learned how to be proud of what he'd accomplished while remaining committed to the values that had made those accomplishments possible. And that, more than any contract or award or industry recognition, felt like the kind of success worth building a life around. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.